And if we're talking about 100% of success in corporate America, that's only 40% of getting you there. The 60% and plus is campaigning, is people, is being like, and on top of that, being a giver, like bending over backwards sometimes to do work that's not your work, to make things look, amazing and get stuff over the finish line. Stuff that you're like isn't within your remit, but that you also can't claim yourself. You need other people to claim for you, which goes back to the campaigning. Because if I'm in my review talking about I did this, I did that, like XYZ, and I have it all written down, right? I now just look like the disgruntled worker who keeps tabs on every fucking favor he does, right? But if I have those same people I did the favors for running to my boss talking about, oh my God, Eddy is the man. Yo, Eddy helped me do this. Eddy helped me do that. XYZ. It's a whole shift.
Mi gente, dímelo, what's good? Welcome to another episode of the Quién Tú Eres podcast, brought to you by Plural. You already know, it's your boy Pavel, bringing you another special episode with another very special guest. As a reminder, on this podcast, the mission is to redefine professionalism. We're trying to help you do your best work. We know that you're wasting so much time faking it, assimilating, and code switching. And we want to provide you with the inspiration and guidance to help you to stop doing that. So every week on the podcast, we have a different guest join us for a very candid conversation around the conflict that they've experienced between professionalism and authenticity. Speaking of guests, the clip that you heard in the intro is with this week's guest, Eddy Hiraldo. Before getting into the conversation, let me give you a quick bio on who Eddy is. So currently he works as a social strategist and spends most of his time being a student of internet culture. Eddy is an experienced strategist, creative, and storyteller, seasoned with, as he describes it, 1 cup of the Bronx, New York, a half a cup of Florida, and 3 teaspoons of both Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico, respectively. Está bien, Eddy? When he's not working on his full-time job, he's a creative strategist for 14th and Market and a brand manager for Black Visionaries. Now that you know a little bit more about Eddy, let's get into this dope conversation. But let's start the conversation what we always do with the word authenticity. Like when you think about the word, what does it mean to you?
When I think about the word authenticity, it means to me, like at brass tacks, is just being you, right? But I would be remiss not to address the fact that it's fucking hard to be you. You're incentivized in every other way to be somebody else, even like the recipes to success. A lot of these recipes, they're not necessarily tailored to you specifically until you go through it and then figure out, oh, this thing works for me. I think authenticity is also being honest if you don't know who you are, but you're like trying to figure it out. And you're honest about the fact that like some days I'm this type of person and then some days I'm this other type of person, like.
Talk to me a little bit about what you mean by recipes. I have an idea and you're probably saying like, well, I'm seeing people that are successful that are older than me and they're the blueprint.
Yeah. So one huge recipe is your ability to be like affable, likable, and create strong work relationships. That being a recipe, it requires a certain level of not even like self-awareness and also emotional intelligence with other people. And then it also requires an insane amount of like emotional adaptability and basically being able, not even emotional adaptability, but also self-awareness enough to adapt to pretty much any situation to like ensure that the people was on your side, the people being, the people that hold the keys to your promotion or your professional success, a referral to another opportunity, that's one huge recipe. It's like,
so I used to tell people, and this is a fact, like I used to literally study white popular American culture on my time off. Like if I got off of work, I'm like, yo, oh my God, new episode of Insecure came out. I can't watch that. I got to binge watch Riverdale because that's what everyone on my team is talking about. And there's nothing wrong with expanding your preferences, right? Like, I love Seinfeld. White people put me on the Brussels sprouts. Love Brussels sprouts, right? But there becomes a point where you try something, you don't like it, and you continue to do it simply for the fact, to your point, you're like, all right, if I watch more of these things, maybe
It's
they'll
gonna,
accept
yeah.
me. Maybe it'll help me in my career. Like,
Mhm.
did you do any of those things? Like, in what way did you try to fit in and become accepted?
Yeah, few different things. I want to say, so having this conversation kind of makes me realize a thing I did like way back in my college days, but that I've kept with me as part of like a way to succeed and a way to easily like, win friends, win influence, things like that, right? So my name is Edward. It's not Eddie. Edward, hella formal, and it's tied to like patriarchy and the names of kings and queens and all this stuff, right? Very rigid. And it's also my father's name, which that's probably a whole nother like rabbit hole. But carving out your own identity for me was not only like trying to carve out something I felt I could own, but when I fully went to Eddie and like with the why, I would always say like, Eddie, because Edward is like way too formal. Or I never wanted anyone to feel as apprehensive as they typically would when I enter a room or when I'm holding space somewhere. I wanted to be easy to talk to, easy to approach, because I knew that I kind of gave off a certain vibe sometimes, especially when I'm like passionate about something. The loud Latino in the room, like, or my loudness being perceived or taken as like aggressiveness.
Are
So
those things that you have been called, or those like stories that you're telling yourself, as far as like they may perceive me this way?
a little bit of both. The rigidness of the name, that's something I definitely told myself. I
Mm.
personally felt like, Edward was way too formal. But as far as like, not being perceived a certain way, those were cues I was getting from people's body language. So it wasn't something that people would say outright, but it was definitely body language. Or I might have a later conversation about like my performance or how I'm showing up, and I've been told like be less devil's advocate, or be less, or not be less precious with the work and the ideas. Basic,
Interesting.
essentially like being asked, yo, you need to have a healthy detachment, because my passion for the things I did want to see go through was like, it was a lot to handle, I guess, for certain people. And when I say certain people, it's definitely not people like me, because people like myself, I've never had that kind of issue, or I've never seen the body language where like, bro, you need to chill, or if it signaled it would be an issue in the future. So with that, I mean, that's one of the things I definitely did. I want to say another way that I tried to fit in. I think it was like around the time of Game of Thrones, like the last season of Game of Thrones. I
Okay.
never got into Game of Thrones, dude. Ever. I still probably won't get into Game of Thrones, but I definitely saw last season mainly because I felt like it made me better at my job, to know like what was going on, and to also know like how things I can draw a line to that people in the room cared about more than I did. Because, working in advertising, especially anything marketing related, you're a salesman. Now, because like since you don't work in sales, the sales department, it's not so cut and dry like what it is you're selling and what it is you're supposed, like how you're supposed to move to sell those things. In sales, everybody knows that like you're trying to sell a product. So you're forgiven for the things you do to like win the client over or make the sale, however gray area it might seem. But when you're in spaces where like the the output is ideas and creative ideas at that, you're selling yourself as a person, as a fucking thought leader, and you're also
Mm.
selling your opinion. And like everybody, or how can I say, when dealing with ideas and creativity, you're dealing with a lot more ego. And because you're
Mm-hmm.
dealing with a lot more ego, there's a lot more at stake if you're caught out there being quote unquote fake, or like you rub somebody the wrong way. It feels like it's way higher stakes, because now
Interesting.
like your word, your ability to sell, your ability to convince someone is so heavily tied to your authenticness as a person let's going back to authenticity. But this authenticity that we're framing is, it's a character almost. It's a character I'm selling you that, yes, like I'm that expert, but I'm also selling you this character because this is the character you show me is the one that is trusted, that gets the looks, that gets the opportunities,
Are you saying like going into, how do I say this? That's really interesting. It's kind of like depending on how you present yourself as a creative.
Yes.
There is a certain perception of you. I'm just making this up, right? But like, let's just say like somebody's dressed quirky or something, and people are like, oh, the quirky guy's coming in. He's a genius. He's so creative. He like dresses a certain way, right? I don't know. Like, is that kind of like people creating characters to feel more believable? I don't know.
Yeah. Yes. But like that's a first layer. Like your looks would be the first layer. That's like not even what I'm talking about is like 3-4 layers deep, where it's like the small moments. It's even the choice of words that you have, like being mindful of every piece of body language, every tick in a meeting, and even how you respond to like client feedback and your responses. All those things are carefully curated in order to make sure that you're taking steps toward progress in a creative career, which ultimately is being able to toe the line between making creatives feel good about their creative ideas, towing the line between that and letting them know that, yo, you can do way better, or like this work can be way better. This work being like it's not speaking to a diverse audience, or it's just not hitting. Like this is what we're getting paid, thousands of dollars for XYZ. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I want to go back to some of these like recipes that you mentioned earlier around success. Like what are some other recipes that you think you've been trained to believe that you need to do in order to be successful?
Micromanaging, 1000%.
People told you that?
No.
Like,
see, but that's the thing. Like these are recipes that I've essentially come upon through so many other words and having to kind of piece it together. Right.
Gotcha.
But like no one is going to tell you outright that, or someone would tell me, right? And especially in our new work environment, which is like hybrid and stuff, right? They're like, yo, you have to over communicate. And then when I ask them like what does that mean? They're like, yo, like you're about to do something, or like you have an idea of something and you're like going to work on this or whatever, you draft up a little message or whatever, you let your boss know, you let the team that you're involved with know XYZ, and then you go do the thing and then you update them while you're doing the thing. This is the thing they're telling me to do, but nowhere in that whole explanation they're like, yo, gotta be a micromanager.
Yeah.
But after just explaining every piece of what they said I should do, how is that not micromanaging?
It's like you're micromanaging yourself, essentially.
Yes, exactly.
I hate that shit. Oh my God.
Because it is perceived to your boss or whoever that is the micromanager themselves, or that like if your boss appreciates the constant check-in, the constant like knowing what it is you're doing, they're micromanaging you. But they're not like there's such a negativity around the word itself. Nobody wants to say that they're doing that. And by God, they will deny. And because like truthfully, nobody wants to be micromanaged, nor do they want to be called the micromanager. And yet we have these systems in place, or one of these recipes is to over communicate, because we're in this new environment where like I'm working from home and supposedly they need to know what I'm doing at all fucking times. Like,
yeah, it makes me feel like a child.
Not only a child, but it also undermines your ability as a professional to do the job in the way that best suits you.
Yeah, right.
And like it also undermines the bullshit they give you when they're selling you a job that, we brought you in for your personality, we brought you in to bring in different types of thinking and stuff. It's like that's the sell, and then you come in and the reality is like, nah, homie, you got to get with the Joneses, which is another recipe. Or I guess moving into another recipe, which is pretty simple. It's like adapt or die. And that's just putting like a title to some of the stuff I already, just talked about with you, which is like selling this character, changing how you do certain things, XYZ. Like adapt in this case being be whoever it is you need to be to win in this system.
Yeah.
You
It's
know, so
it's
it's a little
interesting
bit
too,
of like
because
learning and then, you know, playing against that, I guess.
yeah, I experienced something very similar when I was at Facebook, for example, and all these companies do it, right? It's like bring your most authentic self to work, and that's why I focus on the word authenticity, because I think it means something different to everybody. But I was on the sales team, and I came in with my sort of like own delivery to things,
Yeah.
and eventually you learn that there's a whole team within the organization that is in charge of creating pitch decks for the entire organization. And what you end up doing is like memorizing the script that this team put together in this pitch deck. And there are certain words that you have to say because it's like very Facebooky, right? So I can't just say something like it's an extensive playlist. I can't use the word extensive. I have to say the word curated, right? Like there are certain words and buzzwords that like I have to throw in, or like I didn't do a good job. And it's interesting. It's like they tell you to be authentic, yet if you recorded 100 salespeople delivering a pitch or educating clients on a certain thing, we're all using the same exact language with the same exact delivery. You know what I mean? Like it takes away the personality that they claim they wanted you to have. You know what I mean? Like, have you experienced that?
Yes, I want to say in a different way, less like, so in my case, because I build the decks or I build a lot of
Mm,
decks, there's like certain structures to how certain decks should go.
sure.
But I think I've experienced that probably the most in like a setting where we're having a client conversation and there's some things you can't say, or like being on a client call, you can't, or it felt like, you know, you can't argue with your teammate or like have a differing opinion to your teammate on the call in front of the client, like that whole united
Yeah.
front idea. I mean, you know, it's like, I guess, but are we always going to be in agreement? One, and two, like, can't we use a disagreement as a tool to help get the client on our side? Like, if you know that I'm a good debater, let's say, you know, like trying to find solutions or ways to fit in the personalities instead of squeezing them around this box that they got to fit into. I think that's what I've definitely experienced in the past, and you know, even sometimes now. I would also say, going back to the ego piece, one of the scripts that we definitely like sometimes adhere to is we're reviewing ideas, concepts, and things we want to do, and like you hold your tongue until the end. Like you don't discuss during, or if you have an idea or anything, you just like, and I mean, there's a departure from like, if the value is let everyone speak, but then the expectation in this meeting is to be like a workshop and stuff. Kind of a mixed message when it's like a workshop, but everybody got to shut the fuck up until the presentation's over, you know. And then on top of that, like either during the meeting or after, certain leadership might have an opinion on who the hell is talking and who should and should not have an opinion. Very political in that sense, I think.
There are a lot of like unspoken rules within this whole like political corporate system.
Yes, I agree.
Like you're constantly selling yourself, to your point, to continue building that credibility, to continue building that relationship. And I think it's interesting what you said as well. It's like it goes so much beyond how you look, how you present yourself. Like I often compare it to like you're always running for president is how I put it internally. Like you
Yeah.
always, it's not about just doing the work. It's also about like letting
Campaigning.
everyone within the organization know that you're doing the work.
Yep.
And it's weird though, right? Because it literally goes against everything we've been taught growing up. Keep your head down, just work. They'll see your work. And then you get to this spot and it's
Dog,
just like, no, it's the complete opposite.
a recipe I was given not too long ago, and this shit still like fucks me up, man. But it fucks me up because of how true it is in a lot of companies. And if we're talking about 100% of success in corporate America, that's only 40% of getting you there. The 60% and plus is campaigning, is people, is being like, and on top of that, being a giver, like bending over backwards sometimes to do up work that's not your work, to make things look, you know, amazing and get stuff over the finish line. Stuff that you're like isn't within your remit,
Yeah.
but that you also can't claim yourself. You need other people to claim for you, which goes back to the campaigning. Because like if I'm in my review talking about I did this, I did that, like XYZ, and I have it all written down, right? I now just look like the disgruntled worker who keeps tabs on every fucking favor he does, right? But if I have those same people I did the favors for running to my boss talking about, oh my God, Eddy is the man. Yo, Eddy helped me do this. Eddy helped me do that, XYZ. It's a whole shift.
Mm-hmm.
Like the goal is you should always have your list of shit you did. Be able to point to those things and remind yourself that you did those things. But no one ever tells you that the goal is not to have your personal list, but to have every encounter with your boss or whoever has the keys to your promotion, like essentially have that list also, but not by way of you handing it to them, by
Mm-hmm.
everyone else handing them that list. By having so many people come up to them that they're like, fuck, I gotta take record of all the shit that people keep telling me about this person. Never mind that I do my job just fine. It's all the extra shit.
Yeah.
Or if I did like extra, stuff on the job that I'm supposed to do.
That shit was so exhausting for me at one point that I told my manager, and this was actually around the time of COVID. I was like, yo, I don't want a promotion. Like, if I got a campaign, I don't want to campaign this quarter. I don't want a promotion or this half. And it's also kind of weird, too, because I don't think my manager ever heard that before. Like, what do you mean you don't want a promotion? Everybody wants a promotion. Like, we're trained to think like, yeah, I want the bigger, better next step up. And I was like, no, I'm good. And it's weird because it's like, what do you do with that person? Like, how do I put this? Like,
if one of my favorite movies is The Matrix, right?
Okay.
And The Matrix is it's like a huge analogy to real life. The Matrix being like the world that we're living in, XYZ, and then Neo, like there's a select handful of people who choose to like exit the Matrix to live outside of that in the real world and be kind of the anomaly. So in this to connect the dots real quick, I feel like there's a lot of people who choose and love the Matrix, and in this situation, the Matrix would be corporate America, corporate living, having a good job and a good career, because those are the things for them that they've bought into, and that, I mean, one, they bought into, and two, like they don't see a reason to exit it, usually by way of privilege or the fact that like you've seen this work out for the rest of your family, so why am I going to do anything different? But for other people who are on the fucking short end of the stick inside of the Matrix, they looking for anything but the Matrix, They're like, yo, like I ain't getting where I'm not gonna go anywhere I'm supposed to go, or I'm not gonna go anywhere I want to go in this system. So I either make this system mine, which is Neo flexing on all these people, or I exit completely. And I exit completely, which is like, I don't know, the people who would never go into the Matrix, or the operator, right? Versus the people who would go in and out of the Matrix, right? It's like code switching almost. No pun intended, but literally they're uploading you with code. Bro, it's way ahead of its time, but like it's that whole idea. It's the idea that a lot of people, especially those who come from the privilege that corporate America has allowed for them to have, and knowing that they're gonna it's not gonna be hard for them to excel in that system, there's no reason to buy out of it.
Facts.
So I think the challenge is, so you're in this like emotional, psychological minority where you probably do hate your job. And there's probably millions of people who fucking hate their job, and they use the money that they get through the job to fund their version of the dream. It doesn't address the fact that it's already hard for you in the system that's made. So imagine just how much harder it's going to be for you going outside of that system. And like, so there's people who are like, oh, I don't want to change it, right?
It's really hard.
And then there are people who are like, yo, but I don't think I'm ready to take the leap and the jump to even go harder outside of that system.
I would argue that it's much easier to work within the system. As difficult as it
Exactly.
is, it is like, to your point, like there is a system in place where you can plug yourself in and be successful and make really good money. And like there's so many things and perks and benefits that are already taken care of for you. As much campaigning that you have to do, and I've done it, as much as all the things, it is much easier than what the fuck I'm doing now.
It's much easier, but then I guess,
For now at least.
yeah,
Because who
right.
knows? It may be a lot easier once I figured it out and built the thing that I want to build and all that stuff. But the first few years, I guess, like until you're figuring that shit out, shit is depressing.
For sure. And you question yourself a lot, and you're like, yo, like, should I have even done this, XYZ?
Right.
And that's
Right.
the power of the system. The system is like a fucking planet with an orbit. That shit is pulling you in, son. It's like it's once you're exiting that orbit, right? Like you see the spaceships turn on fire and shit like that. That's what it is. You're on fire right now. You're fucking scorching because you're trying to exit. But once you exit, yo, you're floating. You're in space. The expanse is crazy,
Bro,
I got analogies for days, man.
you
But
making me
like,
want to bench press right. You making me want to bench press right now.
I'm happy, actually. I'm happy. Bro, I'm not gonna lie to you, man. I have reservations about taking this call. I was like, what the fuck am I gonna say about professionalism, but I just told myself do it and speak from the heart. And like, that's also like the stuff we're talking about is things I'm dealing with actively now. And like, to the point where we all have to make a decision at some point, whether we're gonna stay in orbit or be on the planet, whatever, choose whether or not we want to stay in the matrix, take the blue pill, the red pill. And I think for me personally, I'm definitely gravitating toward outside the system. There's so much more to life than like this linear progression. This go to college, get a job with the degree that you have, and then, work until you can retire. And what I mean by so much more is like so many other ways to get to the end point that is retiring and also providing for your family and like living the good life.
Yeah. The thing is that you have so many examples of that recipe, of that blueprint, of people doing that linear path, as you called it. There aren't that many examples, successful examples of people doing the other. So to your point, like, who has the recipe for the other path? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, and I was talking to a mentor a couple months ago about that. I was talking about the things I want to do, and one of the things he told me was what is the output that you want to, like, that's what you're selling, that's your thing. And at the time I was like, damn, I guess I do have to get more specific. And like I asked him, how the hell did you get to that? And he said, man, I read and I read and I read and I studied. But like, studying other people, studying other processes, other ways that people have made it. And like, for what that pushed me to do, like, I did have some reservations. I'm like, read, man? Are you serious? Just fucking read until my eyes bleed.
I hate
Like,
reading.
right? But what I ended up telling myself with that was, but I need to be an explorer. I need to go fucking seek it out. I need to flip rocks and see what the hell is under all these different things. And if like where I'm at, I'm not getting that, or if where I am in life, it's not being given to me, like, you gotta search for it. And you gotta, put weird shit in the query or in your Google search,
Yeah.
see what comes up. And then if you can't, like, go to the library. But what I would say is, like, in the most simplest terms, is that no one's really gonna have that success story, but because like it's
You'd be
always going to
surprised they're
be
out there.
slightly, they're out there. I don't want to say like no one has it. What I mean to say is more that there are a bunch of different versions out there, and the goal is not to find the version for you. The goal is to find the next step that works for you from whoever that example is.
Yeah.
Complete that step, and then you find the next step from whoever else, like it, and it that best fits you.
Yeah.
It's like a personal puzzle that you're building, But if you only have 10 pieces and those 10 pieces represent your whole life experience, your puzzle can only be so big. Or never mind a puzzle, a bridge or a tower, whatever. You have bricks, same thing. So that knowledge base, like just soaking in information, different ways that people did things, was really helpful. And that's what I started to do as far as like, okay, how am I going to figure this out for myself? And, like, where am I going to find these examples? And to that point, I was reading Virgil Abloh's.
I was about to say him and his 3% rule. Is that what you're saying?
Not 3%, but that's a great rule.
It's a
But
great
like,
rule. Can you say it just for the people that know?
I forgot what it means.
It's essentially like if you change 3% of something, it's a brand new product.
Yes.
Essentially.
And that's what he did with his Pyrex.
Right.
His
Exactly.
Pyrex flannels, right? Like,
exactly.
He printed Pyrex on them and then sold them for like 500% more, and everybody wanted it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
to that point, one thing he also said was, I have many mentors, and the mentors that he was describing to, this is in his little book also, just like thoughts and stuff that he's written down, and they compiled it into that small book. He talks about mentors that he's had, and that how he sees mentorship, period, is like all these idols that he has, Kanye being one of them, let's say like Bill Gates is another, Tom Ford and like other top designers, but then outside of that as well, like being in the music scene or even in basketball, him, like, his point of view being that those are all my mentors, because he understood the value of like learning objectively from their journey, from their process, from the things that they've done, to have an even larger like capacity or propensity of understanding what is possible and just how exactly do I make it real.
Yeah. Pull inspiration from everywhere. Like, just because you work in fashion doesn't mean you only got to take inspiration from those people in
man.
fashion.
I mean, like,
and also,
one day I sat down and I literally wrote down every person I look up to as far as a celebrity goes, and every person that I would want to be like. And that's from like Denzel Washington to Jordan Peele, Virgil, Kanye. I mean, he's very problematic, so I don't know how much, like, I don't know how much I want to be like him.
I get it.
I think it's a fact that people can learn from his rise to the top,
From anybody. I think too is like, sorry. I was gonna say I know we're at time, so I want to be mindful of that. The other thing I was gonna say is like, as you're doing all this research, like sometimes to your point, like you may not find the exact person, right? But you also have the opportunity in that moment to be like, I'm gonna be the person that I was looking for.
Yeah, I'll say sometimes. I'll leave you with this. My therapist way back when suggested I read something called Letters to a Young Poet by Rainer Maria Wilk, a really well-known poet. And like, he's not a black guy and he's not Hispanic, unfortunately. I wish he was. But one of the most powerful things that I read in those letters was, sometimes it's just, and this is like a paraphrase, like I don't think this is on the money, but essentially it's about, or sometimes it's just about having the questions and living with the questions. You might know, you have this inherent knowing and feeling of what needs to happen, but you can't perfectly articulate it, but you might not be able to perfectly articulate it. You might not be able to put structure around it for a long time, but like, you got to continue to go forward, because that's the only way you'll live into the answer, into the framework, into being able to say, this is exactly like what I did / who I've become or what I've achieved.
Mi gente, that wraps up another episode of the Quién Tú Eres podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, do us a favor, like, share, comment, tell a friend to tell a friend. And if there's an option to leave a rating or review, please do so. It's going to help ensure that these stories and experiences get heard by as many people as possible. And that's the only way that we're going to redefine professionalism. So your engagement goes a long way. Thank you, and see you next week.